Welcome to another edition of Through the Fire and the SBN Small Business Network podcast. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today I have a special guest, licensed therapist, author, podcaster, and public speaker, Debbie Caudle. Welcome, Debbie. How are you doing today?
Hey, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me here. I am doing awesome.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit, who is Debbie Caudle?
Sure. Wow, that's kind of a loaded question, though. Like, where do I even start? I first and foremost, Ryan, I am a Christian. I mean, I think that is the most important thing about myself. Secondly, I am a wife. I am married to the most amazing man ever. I was just thinking about this yesterday when I was running around the indoor track at my gym. Like, I have married a man who is like a 1 in a million man. He's amazing. Um, and then, of course, professionally, I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed Christian marriage therapist, and I've been doing this a long time, like over 30 years. I'm actually coming up on year 31 here in May, and I know I don't look that old, but I was a young grad student. No, I'm kidding, of course. And my business has morphed over the years, but um, I think probably the most striking thing that has really transformed me and my business was a sad event, and that was my divorce to my first husband. When I graduated grad school, I was 25, so young. I mean, I literally just went from elementary to junior high to high school to, because I'm Canadian, so our terminology is a little bit different there. And then I went to a private Christian college, and then right from there into grad school, and then barely married, and I was always the youngest. I graduated high school at 17 and 25 when I got my master's, and I was always, the person who was working with people who had gone through all these life experiences that I had never had. And the first time I really sort of became aware of like, oh, this is what that's like, was when I started to have really serious difficulties in my marriage that ultimately led to the demise of my marriage. I'll never forget year 2013. And this was about 5 years actually before the separation. I started having panic attacks. And I mean, I had worked with hundreds of people before that who had panic attacks, but I had never experienced them. So you can work with people and you can understand, up here in your head, like what that's really like. But until you've walked that path, you have no idea. So going through that for me really, it transformed me as a woman. It transformed me as a Christian, and it transformed my business, because my husband and I at the time actually were serving our church in the Middle East. We had signed up to do a year-long project in the Middle East, and we were both volunteering at different schools there. And that is really where everything sort of blew up. And here we are in Jordan. There's no marriage counseling there. There's nobody to walk us through that. And I didn't want anybody to know, because imagine the shame of a therapist who's been helping people for all these years and her marriage is failing. Like, I didn't want anybody to know. I wanted us to try to fix this by ourselves and keep it super hush hush. And I had this amazing plan. I had it all worked out. We were going to go home over the summer because I had actually been invited by my school to come back for another year. They were very happy with me, and they wanted to offer me a job. And the way they do it, the jobs are like, a year or 2 year contracts, and then they decide if they're going to renew. So my husband and I, before it all sort of blew up, had both agreed, yeah, we'll do this. We'll come back again. So when everything came to a head, my plan was, let's go home for the summer. Let's get a marriage counselor. He'd already told me I'm not coming back. So I said, well, you could go live with your parents. We'll do marriage therapy over the summer. I'll come back to Jordan, and I'll work virtually with a therapist, and then I'll come back, for all the major holidays, and nobody needs to know. Well, of course, it did not happen that way. Everything just really blew up, fell apart. And he was brought back early, and I was brought back 3 weeks later before the school year was out. And I walked into like a mess. He had come back and really damaged my reputation. He called up everybody he could think of to, badmouth me, former former pastors, former employees. I mean, I had people at church who wouldn't talk to me anymore. And so because everything was so unsettling, I had no idea what life was going to look like, whether we were going to reconcile or not. I had to focus on my business. And my business was on like a 2-year hiatus because the year prior to Jordan, we had taken a year off to attend some theology courses. So I really wasn't working that year. And then we went to Jordan. So 2 years of really I had 1 or 2 clients here or there, but it was pretty much on pause. So I had to unpause my business and start all over again. And while I was in Jordan, I had actually been working on this course for women. And I had originally called it A Christian Woman's Guide to Intentional Living. Because if we go back a few years prior to Jordan, I had started to take responsibility for my own unhappiness. Imagine that, right?
Yeah.
A therapist who's telling everybody, be accountable, be responsible. But I realized when I was having those panic attacks that I was so burnt out in so many ways financially, and I felt like I had to make all the decisions, and there were just so many things going on. I had to stop and go, okay, Debbie, nobody can fix this for you. You've got to do this. And I started to put some things in motion that, of course, put my marriage on a path, we won't drown in the weeds, but I put my marriage on a path that I thought we were on the same page. We were talking about these things, and he was supportive on the surface, but really internally, he was really, really struggling with a lot of these things. But that path that I put myself on, I began to pour that into this course for women. And I had invited just a small handful of women while I was in Jordan to do the course with me. And the caveat was, I'm still writing it. So I'm like hardly charging you anything. And I'm writing a module a month, and then I'll send it to you guys out through email. And they're like, sure, we want to do this with you. So here I had this course written after I got back from Jordan. And what am I going to do with this? Well, that was the beginning of essentially what is now By Divine Design Coaching, my business. So that course was all about, for women, all about intentional living and what that really means. And the whole metaphor that I use in that course and even in my book, which both are now called The Path Less Traveled, is about how we get to this point as women where we're at this crossroads. And this can happen many times in our life, but we get to these crossroads moments where we can decide we're unhappy. We've got these unmet expectations and these disappointments in life. And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to blame our husband? Are we going to blame God? Are we going to blame people around us? Or are we going to step up and do something about it? Right. And so that crossroad moment is, do we continue down that familiar path? I don't say comfortable because it's not often very comfortable. Yeah. Lots of ruts that we've created up by ourselves, or right, other people have created for us. Or are we going to take that other path? And that's such a hard decision, I think, for us, not just women, men too, because that's scary, right? There's this bend in the road on that other path. We can't see around that corner. We don't know what change is going to bring. It looks like it's clear of those ruts, but who knows? And so I talk also about like the transitional period between getting off of this familiar path and onto this intentional path. Because when you make those changes, you're going to get resistance. And that's all of that was born out of what happened in my marriage, right? So I know you're really, really, I love that you love to talk about mindset, because I honestly feel like everything boils down to mindset. Like when I finally woke up to my own unhappiness and realized you're in your own rut, Debbie, and you're miserable, and nobody's throwing you a rope. You gotta make your own rope or build a ladder. So look around you in this big hole that you've created and figure out what tools and materials you've got so you can start building. And that is really everything that I do now is about that.
I love it. I love how you're just talking about that, because that's right. No one is coming to save you
I
whatsoever.
was coming.
Like,
Yeah.
you better look around and see what resources, and that's, I did an episode on that, like maximizing resources, like the ninth mile mentality, like what resources are around you. Get started.
Yeah.
More will be given to you
Yeah.
once you start maximizing the stuff you have around you.
Yeah. And the separation and ultimately the divorce really transformed my relationship with God too, because I grew up in the church, and I was taught to pray and I was taught to study my Bible, and I'm a firstborn, and I'm a pretty typical firstborn. Like, I do what I'm told. Like, adults always loved me as a kid. The kids always thought, like, you're, goody two shoes, you're lame. We want to go do all these things to get us in trouble. But I never wanted to get in trouble. So I was always a very obedient child. So I had this very obedient sort of relationship with God. But when I when when I say separated, I mean we moved into separate bedrooms, right? We were still under the same roof. That was very, very, also
Weird.
very difficult. Weird. I mean, like, so many words that I could use, right? Like, stressful and hard. And I was blaming myself a lot because I was the one who initiated the separation. I was the one who went to my husband and said, "We're in trouble. I don't know if I love you anymore. We need help." I didn't want a divorce. I didn't want him to then take that and think we're done. But that is essentially what happened. He heard that in his brain and took it to this whole nother level of, she's never loved me. So he initiated moving to the next bedroom, and he just began to slowly shut down on me. And I just felt like the worst human being ever. And I struggled to sleep. So I would wake up at 3, 4 in the morning, crying, praying. And I'd get up and walk because there was no going back to sleep. And Jordan is built on 7 mountains, so a lot of steep hills. So here I am at 4 or 5 in the morning, dark. The only other people out there are old Muslim men on their way to the mosque to pray, and I'm praying too. I'm just walking up and down hills talking to God, and that was such an amazing time in my life because I moved from this very sort of rote, mechanical, obedient relationship with God to like almost still chokes me up to think about it. Like, God loves me. God loves me. He hates divorce, and he hates, seeing my marriage in this place, but he wants me to reach out to him, and he's got me, and he's listening to me. And it just, it, I only had him really to lean on. We were there with 3 other young adult women, and they're all amazing. To this day, I have this wonderful relationship with all 3 of them, but one especially was really there for me. But they were young. They were in their 20s, I was in my late 40s, and none of them were married, so they couldn't fully relate. And I had no family there, and it's an 8-hour difference, 9-hour, 10 hours, depending on where my family were. So it's not like I could just pick up the phone, right, and talk about this. I really was alone, and it really made me lean on God. So, I mean, this is so true for so many people, right? That was my crossroads moment. That was my moment where, it had begun happening 5 years before, but in that moment, I realized, first and foremost, anything that I anything that I'm going to build out of this to be a better woman, to be a better Christian, to be a better therapist, to be given the opportunity someday to be a future wife, it's got to come from God. So yeah.
I I love how you say that too, because not too many people recognize that God comes to you mostly in your lonely state
Yeah.
through all the pain. He lets all the
Yeah.
pain happen because you've got to be broken for you to come to him and to humble you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I've seen that so many times, and I in my own personal life, Like, it took me forever to recognize what that was.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, we can be experts in our area, but I think the human tendency is when you're good at something and you get a lot of recognition for that, you forget to give God the credit. It can go to your head. And I look back on in times of my life where, when I was married before and the business was thriving and, we had all these clients coming in, I was doing a different kind of therapy at the time. And, there was a little bit of arrogance growing inside of me, like, hey, we're the premier counseling center in this county and everybody's coming to us for this specialized, God humbled me. I mean, we ended up, I mean, really seriously, through the sort of demise of my marriage, that was also the demise of that business. And it's amazing for me to look back on that now and to see the lessons that God was teaching me through that. And so now, even though I don't do this perfectly, I really try to convey in both my words and actions, like, if you've gotten anything out of this, not all my clients are Christian, but for the ones who are, if you've gotten anything out of this is God passing through me to give to you. And when I talk to God, before my day begins and I'm going to be working with clients, I'm very, very aware of the privilege of being let into people's private lives. And if they're going to get anything positive out of working with me, it's because God gave me those abilities. He gave me that insight. He gave me that wisdom. It all comes from him first and foremost.
Yeah, greatly stated right there. So, one major question I have for you after hearing
Sure.
all that knowledge being dropped right there, what is probably you, in your mind, one of the biggest challenges most people face in relationships?
Mm. Well, I do think it actually does come back to mindset. I'm glad you asked that question because most of the time, what I see is that people are pinning their happiness on something or someone that they can't change. So in marriage, a lot of times what I see is that men and women are blaming their spouse or their situation for why they are so miserable. And this is where mindset becomes so important because when you blame, you are now powerless. You have now created a state of victimhood for yourself. You are saying, I can't do anything about this situation until you do something. If you would just fill in the blank, if you would just do the dishes the way I want you to, if you would just fold the laundry, if you would just get a job, if you would just whatever it is, then I wouldn't be so angry. Then I wouldn't be so hurt. Then I wouldn't be so anxious. And now we've basically abdicated any personal responsibility for our own happiness. I think the other part of that too, I have a client, I have to say this because it's so amazing to hear anybody say this. I have a man that I'm working with who has a pretty, I think, unhappy marriage. And he told me the other day, he said, Debbie, happiness is really not my goal. He says, I'm not somebody who's like chasing after happiness. And I almost fell off my chair because who says that, right? But that's really true. That's a powerful mindset because so many of us are chasing after happiness, and happiness is often very much linked to things around us that we don't have any control over. Whereas joy and contentment and peace are internal states of mind. And we can learn to be content. We can learn to be joyful even when things around us aren't perfect. And of course, that also comes back to our relationship with God. We can, we can say, my marriage is in a season right now of whatever, we're raising young children. So we're in a season of parenthood where there's some stress and we're going to eventually get through that season. Or we're in a season of financial challenges because one of the other or other of us doesn't have a job right now. But these are seasons and this will pass because I'm trusting in God, and I'm trusting that God is leading my partner to grow and learn what he or she needs to learn. But how many times do we do that? Instead, we are blaming our happiness on somebody else.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Like I tell people, even people I work with that like want to become leaders in their industry, I'm like, you
Mm.
have to be the change. You can't
Yeah,
expect somebody to follow you and to be a certain way unless you're gonna be the change that they need.
yeah.
You got to
And
model what you want from
you
people.
yeah, and those words have become almost really trite. Like people hear that, they're like, yeah, 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 right? So trying to find like a new way to say it because it hasn't stopped being true. Any good coach, any good therapist, any good pastor, any good, whether you're a sports coach or a relationship coach or a business coach or whatever, they all say that. So there must be something to that, everybody, right? But we hear that so much that it's like in one ear and then out the other. I
Yeah,
have to share this metaphor with you because I'm a metaphor queen. I love metaphors. And I was talking with a client yesterday and we were talking about the inner critic, right? Like that voice in your head that's like always um, so negative. And this metaphor can work two ways because sometimes you can have a partner. Jeff and I, my husband and I, we both speak the same love languages. I mean, like all five of them literally are aligned. So, it's a love fest around here all day, right? All day long. It's an amazing marriage. But because of the trauma of both of our previous relationships, it's like we can never hear enough positive things from each other because here's the metaphor. It's like Pac-Man in your brain is just gobbling up all of those little positives. Like so your spouse says something really positive to you and that Pac-Man voice in your head is like gobble gobble
yep.
gobble gobble
Gobble,
eats
gobble,
it
gobble.
all up, right? And transforms it into the negative little goblins that are running around in your brain. So I think that's another reason why we can really struggle to absorb this whole thing of be the change because there is that inner voice that's like, yeah, but we're yeah,
Said,
butting all the time.
said when I even start out with clients, I mean, we usually, like, especially the ones I do mindset training with for the athletes,
Yeah.
we always start out with confidence because I got to reprogram their mind and the way they think.
Yeah.
And I tell people it's like the average person has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% are negative.
It's so
Think about
true.
it is. And I said, and then I tell them,
Yeah.
like, for every one negative thought you have, it takes 10 positive thoughts just to counteract that one.
I know.
And it's
Which
like,
would
we got to
you would
start.
think would right, you would think that would tell people like, I got to rein in my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, hey, that's a biblical scripture, right? Renewing of your mind, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, but that's really challenging for people. Even now after like 30 some years of doing this, I always tell people like the goal isn't you're never going to be 100% in terms of like reining in your thoughts. Like if we can do like get to like an 80-20 kind of thing, hey, we're doing really, really good. 20% of the time, the Pac-Man's just gobbling up the good stuff. But 80% of the time, you're able to catch that. I always tell people the goal is to spot the negative thinking faster than you did yesterday and the day before and the day before. And so you're not eliminating the negative thinking, but you're like that awareness in your brain of like, what am I doing? Like, I'm totally negating anything positive that's going on in my life. And then reframing that thinking, learning how to do that. That's the key. You're not
Yeah.
eliminating it entirely, right? You're just learning to create that awareness and catch it so much faster and then know what to do about how to turn those thoughts into positives. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I said you have to recognize the patterns that you have in your thinking. I mean, that's the only way you can catch
Yeah.
everything. It's like everybody has patterns and you have to catch them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, how is your approach to therapy a little different than other therapists? And I heard this on another podcast, and that's why I was asking.
Well, I'm really glad you asked that. Yeah. Okay, so I come from a long line of teachers, right? And I was actually going to be a teacher when I set out to go to college, and I think God, moved me in this direction. But I have sort of found my way back to teaching because I am a very solutions based therapist. I really have like more of a coaching approach to the way that I do things. So when people come to me, a lot of times I'll hear this complaint from people who've worked with therapists before me. There is this therapeutic approach out there of, I'm the therapist, you're the client, and I'm asking these great open-ended questions, and I'm giving, I'm listening to you, and I'm repeating back what you're saying. And what I'm really doing is I'm creating this wonderful space for you to just sort of, you know, process whatever needs to be processed, and then you kind of come to your own aha moment and off you go, right? I don't do that. That's not how I do therapy. And part of the reason for that is that is a very humanistic approach, that everything within you is already within you, and you just have to tap into your sort of inner power and, release it. I don't believe that's biblical, right? And I think also a lot of people are looking, when they come to therapy, if they just wanted to vent, if they just wanted to have somebody listen to them and pay a bunch of money, they could go talk to family. They could talk to friends. They could go talk to their pastor, right? And those people would listen just as adequately, for the most part, as a therapist. So when someone reaches out to work with me, I'm very clear with them about, look, if you work with me, we're going to really identify your goals. We're going to figure out what direction you want to move in. That's going to be our blueprint going forward. And then you are going to have very specific, very concrete tools from me. And I'm going to walk you through how to use those tools and what we're looking for, what they should look like in your life. And there's going to be some educational stuff in there. And you're going to have some homework because, that's the teacher in me. Is that what you want? And everybody, I've never had anybody say no. Everybody says, yes, yes, I want to know how to fix this problem. So I think that's the big difference, is I provide a lot of actual guidance. I actually walk people A to Z through how to get the result that they're looking for in their lives.
And I think that's a better approach too. I mean, there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be like some hands-on work, or else you're never going to fix anything if you're not getting in the mud and getting a little dirty, as we say.
Absolutely. I went through therapy when I was going through the divorce, and I told my therapist, give me homework. Like, I need stuff to do. I need, outside of this time with you, I need things to think about, write about. She's like, okay, we'll do that. But I knew to show up and say, hey, this is what I need. Most people, they're looking for that, but they don't necessarily know to ask for that, nor are they always finding that in the therapists that they are working with.
I love that approach. So, with all this going on, how did you get into podcasting, of all things?
Well, I mean, this has been a journey, right? So when I got back from Jordan, I had to build a whole new website, and the way that you marketed your business had changed on me. I mean, it used to be that, literally, before, I would take an ad out in the yellow pages, and I would print out flyers and go put them around town, and business cards. When I got back from Jordan, all of a sudden we were in this, now it's social media. And I got into all of this sort of kicking and screaming a little bit. Like, okay, I can do the website. I've had a website before, but then my friend who did my website, who had a background in marketing, she's like, Debbie, now you have to write blogs. Now, I love to write, but I had never written a blog really. I mean, I had sort of kept a bit of a travel blog being in Jordan, but the idea of putting a blog up on a website was totally new, because there's some rules to blogging and how long they need to be in the formatting. So I remember just thinking, oh, I don't know. Can I do this? Can I do this? Okay, I'll do it. Then she said, all right, Debbie, you've got to put some posts out on Facebook. I'm like, what? What do you mean I got to put posts out? So I had to buy a ring light. I didn't even know those things existed. So she, found one on Amazon for me. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I had to figure out how to use it. And then I had to learn how to like which way to put my camera. And so then I would record and I'd look back on it and I'd go, oh, that's dumb. That's awful. Cause you got to get used to seeing yourself in a camera. Well, then that got easier and easier. And then it was like fine, piece of cake, easy. And then I started really like hiring coaches, right, to get serious about this. And with every coach, I've learned more and more. I learned to create a lead magnet, something free that people would, want to have, and to build subscriber list, and to nurture that subscriber list through emails. And then one coach I was working with, he had a podcast, and so he was introducing the concept of a podcast. So that's essentially how I was like, he's like, and he told me, he said, Debbie, the podcast isn't necessarily to bring new people into your business. It's to nurture the people who are already on your subscriber list, right? Like they downloaded your free guide or whatever it is, but they really don't know anything about you. And they might, I'm always so surprised at like how much research people actually do. They like a post, and so they go look you up, and like
Yeah.
it still sort of boggles my mind that people really are actually out doing that. So the podcast, he told me, was to warm the people up that already have shown some interest in what you're doing. So I went into the whole podcasting thing going, okay, Debbie, this isn't about getting new clients. This is about you just nurturing what you've got. So I started the podcast, got the big fancy mic, and tried out some different platforms, learned a lot through just doing things wrong, joined some Facebook groups to get guests, started doing interviews, and just step by step. And then I discovered this amazing coach who I know Rory Paquette. And that just opened up my brain to like all the things that I could be doing, should be doing with my podcast and posting on social media, and just really that has really transformed my business. But it's been a journey, right? Like literally just started with website, blogging, posting, book, courses, now podcast, right? And if I had been told back in 2018 when this new journey started that I would be doing all of this, I would have probably never even gotten started. I would have been just like, let me just go be hired by an agency and I could just get a salary. If I'd known this is all the things you're going to be doing, Debbie, like posting multiple times a day and 2 podcast episodes a week, I would have been like, that sounds like so much work. There's no way I'm going to be able to do all this, but here I am. So,
I think that was probably had to be like one of the biggest hurdles I had to get over at first too, was like having to do all the posts on social media, because I'm more old school, kind of like you guys. I might not be as old as like you and some of the other people, but I'm more old school where it's like, I don't want people to know my business.
I know.
But
I know.
And you feel like you're bragging when you say anything,
right. Right. Yeah, I mean, so that has definitely been a journey, like what to post, how to post, the types of posts, what to share about me as a person that makes me, approachable and relatable, as opposed to just like Debbie the therapist, Debbie the coach, Debbie the expert. Because I'm a private person. I rarely have ever used social media to let the world know what's going on with me. I've never had that need. So to go from there to being really sort of like a public figure, and my viewership is just growing and growing and growing. It's not now, but it was scary. It was a mental journey along with a physical journey. Yeah. So for sure. I totally relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, I like it's more of a of an unbecoming of who you were, and just to grow into that person to,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
good story, because you, like, instead of focus on what can go wrong, it was, hey, what can go right here?
What could go
What
right?
if?
And
What if?
think about how mindset has been so important for you and I, right?
Yeah,
Not we're coaching and we're teaching people mindset, but we have to walk that walk, right? Like how many times do, like I try to never make what I do about who liked it or who's following me now. I always shut that down in my brain and go, Debbie, just go do your 3 posts today. and
yeah,
and then leave that at the door and move on to something else. If I
yeah,
make my goals about how people respond, are they interacting with my posts? Are they liking my posts? Then that's going to pull me down. And Rory really helped me with this because, my field, not everybody wants to admit publicly that they're watching me because, they don't want other people to go, oh, does she or does he have a problem with their marriage? Is that why they're liking Debbie's post? So they might be watching me, privately, but they're not necessarily publicly liking, or
yeah.
interacting with it. And so much of my own journey in this has been just like stop attaching your the value of what you're doing to how people are responding or interacting. And that is not easy to do.
No, I mean, because a lot of people you'll notice on social media, it's all about getting validation from others.
Yeah.
I mean, they need
Yes.
that validation. I mean, yeah, it's nice and all, but I mean, at the end of the day, you have to go step out and do the things on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to know why you're doing it and not, as you say, not look for the validation from other people of like, should I be doing this? Is this a good idea? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? And I have not perfected that yet, but I have come a long
It's a
way.
process.
It's a
It's a
process for sure.
process. I mean,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
not
yes.
fully, my ego's not fully gone yet, but it's a work in
Right.
progress for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what inspired you to write a book?
Oh, wow. Well, that same year that I got back from Jordan, it had always been on my bucket list to write a book. And this is another interesting story because in my 20s I had actually started writing a romance book. That's what I grew up reading. My mom read Harlequin romances, my dad read westerns. So that was, that was what I read, what was available to me. And so I had started writing this book, and I'm a good writer. Like I like creative writing. I always did well in English, so I had always had this dream of writing a book. And about 12 chapters into the book, I just stopped writing it. I don't even have like a real reason for why that happened. I just sort of walked away from the book. And periodically over the years, I'd look at it. I still have it. I have the files, and I look at it, and I would tweak it a little bit. I'd edit it a little bit here or there, but I could just never find the motivation to finish the story. Well, I finally realized, and a lot of the realization came when I was creating that first course, the Path Less Traveled course, was that the reason why I didn't finish that book was because it really wasn't speaking to my value system. I had this dream of writing a book, but what I really valued was helping people. I really valued being able to provide some kind of service, and educate people. And that book was just meant to entertain. And that, not to say that that doesn't have value, but that wasn't my purpose. And so once I realized that, it was easy to write the book. So it was on my bucket list. I'm coming back. I'm having to start my business all over again. And I reached out to this company called Speak It to Book, and they are a Christian company that a lot of times they help like ministers transform their sermons into books, but they also help other authors. And so even though I knew I could write my own book, I also only had so much time and energy. So I decided I'm going to spend the money, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have them write my book. So they helped me outline the chapters, and then I was assigned somebody, and he would basically talk, we would talk about what chapter 1 was going to be about, and he would record that, and we worked through the whole book that way. So then the whole process was, it would take 6 months, and then they would come to me with this draft. Well, when I got the draft, I realized I can't publish this book. Like this is not my voice. This isn't me. This isn't how I would say these things. So I rewrote it. And I wasn't married to Jeff at the time, but I had hired Jeff to be my editor because he had a background in editing. This really was what sort of threw us together so much in the beginning, was that he was editing my blogs and my course and now my book. So I rewrote every chapter and what the finished. And so I told them, I said, guys, I have to rewrite this book. They said, okay, no problem. So I basically took another 6 months, rewrote the whole book, sent it back to them. I put it through a few different editors, and then they ran it through their own editor, and then they published it for me to Amazon. But yeah, that was the journey of the book.
Awesome.
And it's
Are
for
you on
women,
Amazon
but
still right now? Are they still selling your book on Amazon?
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
still available. Rory, actually, I didn't know he was going to do this. He bought the book, and then the next thing I know, he's published it. He's put a post out on one of his Facebook groups about how much he loved the book. I'm like, Rory bought my book? How cool is that, right? A man buys my book
Yeah.
and finds value in it, even though I wrote it for women. So yeah.
That's awesome. So, how do you market with all you're doing? How do you market yourself?
Like
with the podcast?
Yeah. I rely right now. So I've done a couple different things in terms of paid advertising. I worked with one coach. Here, this is the thing about working with coaches, everybody. Most of them want thousands and thousands of dollars, and you don't know for sure what you're going to get till you've already paid that money up front. And then you go through their process and you learn some things, and you may or may not get your full money's worth. And that's just how it goes. So one coach that I hired, I learned about a sales funnel, and I learned about a lead magnet. And then the next coach I worked with, I learned about Facebook ads and, a couple other, and the podcast. And then the next coach I learned about Google ads. So, did some Google ads. It wasn't really until Rory, first of all, he's just a phenomenal coach, and he's so crazy affordable. Like but so I have all these pieces, right? I've got this website and this book and this podcast and these courses. But what I really needed was something to pull it all together. And that was my social media presence. Because up until Rory, I was really only posting like 3 times a week. And nobody had told me that isn't nearly enough, Debbie. Like, you've got to be posting at least 3 times a day and different kinds of posts. I was like, oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, because most people try to tell you to push like websites and everything like that. It's like, but you got to get traffic there.
Exactly. Right. Like, nobody's going to go to your website if they don't know anything about you. Nobody's going to buy your book if they don't know anything about you. No one's going to buy your courses, and so on and so forth. Right. So at the top of your funnel is your marketing piece, and social media marketing is free, right? It's organic. So you can do paid advertising, you can do Facebook ads, you can do Google ads. And a combination of those can sometimes be good, but paid ads are also hit and miss, right? There's a lot of things that go into those as well. If you're patient, there's so many coaches out there, so much noise out there from people who say, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. My one thing is going to transform your business overnight, and I can get you, thousands of viewers and traffic. You have to you have to tune all of that noise out, because the reality is this is a journey. It takes a while to get the algorithm. When you're posting, it takes a while to get the algorithm going. And you have to just be willing to show up and put one foot in front of the other, and then the other, and then the other. It's not an overnight process. It takes time for Facebook and Instagram and these other platforms to really believe that you're a serious content creator and to begin pushing you out. And then you learn to refine your message, right? And you get better at what you're doing, and you get more confident, and and you find out what resonates with people. So then you start focusing more of your content in that way, right? Like when you look at your dashboard, you find out who's interacting with what posts, and you go, oh wow, they really like this. I never expected them to like that. And you start moving your content in that direction. But it's a process, it's a journey. It's not an overnight transformative kind of thing.
Yeah. So, what are some of your short-term and long-term goals that you have?
Um, Again, great question. My short-term goals are just, first of all, to keep doing what I'm doing, to never stop loving the creation of I love making content, and I never want to get so bogged down in the weeds of like I've got to do my post today. I always want to show up every day and go, I love doing these posts. What can I put out there today? That's a little bit different, than I put out yesterday, and that's I'm sharing something that's important, or I'm giving an insight that's important. But first and foremost, I'm having fun. And some days I do that better than other days, but to I always want to show up with energy and passion for what I do, and enjoy it. That's my short-term goals, right? I never want to tie what I do to what other people think, and again, how they interact. My long-term goal is really to continue to build more courses. At heart, I am a teacher and I am a content creator. I really want a curriculum of courses that address, you know, everything relationship oriented. And these are self-paced courses. And then people, can reach out to me for private coaching. But I want to be very selective with the people that I work with, because I want people who are really ready to change, who are really ready to do the work. I've been a therapist for so long, and in the insurance world, you get a lot of people who are just paying their 15 or 20 or $25 copay, and the bulk of that session is being paid by insurance. And that's a certain kind of clientele, right? They might want to change, but they're not super invested in change because it's not costing them very much, right? There is truth to the saying, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So when somebody shows up to this process and they are really willing to financially invest in it, it usually almost means they are hurting so much, and they want and need and desire change so much that they are willing to pay for the expertise. And they don't want just like the dime a dozen therapists are out there. I like to use the metaphor of like there's the Walmart therapists, and then there's the whatever someone's top of the line shopping is. My husband always says, what's that store in Britain, in London? I can't think of it, but like Neiman, higher than Neiman Marcus, whatever the top of the line is.
Yeah.
I want to be and am that kind of therapist, and that you're going to get so much more from somebody who brings that kind of experience to the table than someone who's fresh out of grad school, or just approaches everything from that sort of medical model, and is very sort of in this box, of how,
Yep. Rigid things.
nicely, tight little box of this is how we do things. This is what therapy looks like. No, you want serious change. You work with somebody who really actually knows how to give you that. So I don't know. Does that answer your
Yeah.
question?
That's what I said. And like everybody is so different too in the way they
Yeah.
learn and how they process everything. I mean, each
Yes.
person is different, so they need something different. What
Yeah,
works for one person
absolutely.
doesn't work for the other. Cookie cutter systems don't work most of the time.
I say that all the time. Like this is not a cookie cutter process. So yeah.
So, one of my last questions for you.
Okay.
What book would you recommend to somebody for personal development or mindset?
For mindset, wow. I mean, there's so many out there. There's a couple a couple really good ones that I'm reading right now that I'll share. First of all, I really love The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I really love that. It's not specifically about mindset, but it's definitely correlated. There's also a really good book out there called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I think it's by Susan Powers. I love that book because so much of the things that we think and feel and do are fear-based.
Yeah.
And if you're going to shift your mindset, you have to be aware of how much we live in fear, right? I mean, so much of the language in our head of I can't, I'm scared, what if? What if I fail? What if I succeed and people are going to expect
Yeah.
more of me than I can give them? You know, so much of what limits us, and we never even talked about that today, right? Limiting beliefs and false beliefs, but
Yeah. You could
so
do
much.
a whole episode on just that.
We could. So you'll have to invite me back because I got a fantastic metaphor for that. But I know we don't have time today, but so much of what holds us back is fear. Even like why we stay in an unhealthy relationship. Not to say that everybody should just walk away from their marriage, but a lot of times we stay for the wrong reasons. Fear. And we make excuses for why we're staying, but really it's fear. So that's a really great book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And off the top of my head, I mean, there's just so many, Ryan. I mean, but that one's really great. I think everybody should read that book.
I love it. So how can people get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, debbiecaudle.com, and that's Caudle, debbiecaudle.com. And my phone number's there. My email is there. I don't have links to my courses there because I really don't want people getting, misdirected. So if they're interested in my courses, they can just reach out to me through email or give me a call. So that's really the easiest way. I also have a private Facebook group called Relationship Resolution. And I invite everybody to come join me there because that's free for starters. And I go live in that group usually every 2 weeks to answer people's relationship questions. They aren't asking me live. They're submitting them to me privately because I want to give people anonymity. So whatever questions I get, over the 2 weeks, I then go in live and I answer them. And, I don't give away any personal or private information about people, but it's such a fun thing for me to do. Like I love just showing up and, going live. That was another thing, by the way, that like I had to really grow into is like live. Oh my goodness. No script. I can't delete. I can't, just like erase it and start over. Like that was super scary. But I've done it so many times now that again, I grew into that. So that live is a lot of fun for me because I never know what kind of questions I'm going to get. They can be about anything relationship oriented. So come join that relationship resolution.
Okay, so I got to get you to promise then to come back on then if you want to talk about limiting beliefs. I think we could get a whole big conversation going on that with some stories and everything because that's what I kind of do. It's like help people overcome that. But
yeah,
that's going to do it for today for us. Debbie, thank you for coming on. It was great hearing your background and everything. You have some great knowledge.
Ryan, this was so much fun. You are a very energetic host. You made this just like a really super fun time for me. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. Hey, remember guys, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.